Upon a time, in a small town surrounded by dense forests, there was a house that stood alone at the edge of town. The locals avoided it, for they knew that it was cursed. It had been abandoned for years, but it was said that strange things happened there at night. The wind whispered eerie melodies that made the trees dance and the windows rattle. Nobody knew who owned the house, but some said that it was once the home of a wealthy family that had disappeared without a trace. One night, a group of teenagers dared each other to spend the night in the abandoned house. They laughed and joked, feeling brave and invincible. They crept inside, their flashlights illuminating the dark and dusty interior. The house was filled with cobwebs and old furniture, and the air was stale and musty. As they explored the house, they heard strange noises coming from upstairs. It sounded like someone was shuffling around, dragging heavy chains. The teenagers exchanged nervous glances, but they were determined to see this through. They climbed the creaky stairs and found themselves in a dimly lit room. In the center of the room, there was a circle of candles, flickering in the darkness, and in the center of the circle, there was a book bound in human skin. Once upon a time, in a small town surrounded by dense forests, there was a house that stood alone at the edge of town. The locals avoided it, for they knew that it was cursed. It had been abandoned for years, but it was said that strange things happened there at night. The wind whispered eerie melodies that made the trees dance and the windows rattle. Nobody knew who owned the house, but some said that it was once the home of a wealthy family that had disappeared without a trace. One night, a group of teenagers dared each other to spend the night in the abandoned house. They laughed and joked, feeling brave and invincible. They crept inside, their flashlights illuminating the dark and dusty interior. The house was filled with cobwebs and old furniture, and the air was stale and musty. As they explored the house, they heard strange noises coming from upstairs. It sounded like someone was shuffling around, dragging heavy chains. The teenagers exchanged nervous glances, but they were determined to see this through. They climbed the creaky stairs and found themselves in a dimly lit room. In the center of the room, there was a circle of candles, flickering in the darkness, and in the center of the circle, there was a book bound in human skin. It was a dark and stormy night, the kind of night that makes you want to stay indoors and never venture outside. But for one group of friends, it was the perfect night for a ghost hunt. They had heard stories about an old abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town, a mansion that was said to be haunted by the ghosts of its former occupants. The friends were skeptics, but they wanted to see for themselves if the stories were true. As they approached the mansion, they could feel a sense of unease wash over them. The mansion was dark and foreboding, with broken windows and ivy crawling up the walls. They hesitated for a moment, but their curiosity got the best of them, and they entered the mansion. The interior of the mansion was just as eerie as the exterior. The floors creaked under their feet, and the walls were lined with old portraits of people long since deceased. As they explored the mansion, they heard strange noises, like footsteps and whispers. But they dismissed them as just their imaginations running wild. As they entered the ballroom, they saw something that made them freeze in their tracks. There, in the center of the room, was a ghostly figure in a white dress. She had long dark hair and a sad expression on her face. The friends were stunned, but they were also intrigued. They wanted to know more about this ghostly apparition. As they approached the ghostly figure, they suddenly felt a chill in the air. The ghostly figure looked at them with eyes that seemed to pierce their souls. And then she spoke, her voice soft and melodic. "You should not be here," she said. "This mansion is cursed, and all who enter it are doomed." The friends were terrified, but they couldn't leave. They wanted to know more about the curse, and they wanted to know why this ghostly figure was still haunting the mansion. And so, they listened as she told them the story of the mansion. The mansion had been owned by a wealthy family who had lived there for generations. But one day, a tragedy had befallen the family. The youngest daughter had fallen in love with a man who was not of their social class. Her father had disapproved of the relationship and had forbidden her from seeing him. The daughter had disobeyed her father and had continued to see her lover in secret. But one night, the daughter and her lover had been caught by her father. In a fit of rage, he had killed them both and then had taken his own life. From that day on, the mansion had been haunted by the ghosts of the family. The friends listened in horror as the ghostly figure finished her story. They realized that they had made a mistake by coming to the mansion, and they knew that they had to leave before it was too late. As they turned to leave, they saw the ghostly figure disappear into the darkness. They ran out of the mansion and back into their car, never looking back. As they drove away, they could feel a sense of relief wash over them. They had survived the night, but they would never forget the horror they had experienced in the haunted mansion. The last man on earth sat alone in a room. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. I woke up to hear knocking on glass. At first, I thought it was the window until I heard it come from the mirror again. As I watched the life drain from her eyes, I wondered why I ever thought this was a good idea for a first date. I always thought my cat had a staring problem. She always seemed fixated on my face. Until one day, when I realized that she was always looking just behind me. I was in my bed, trying to sleep when I heard my dog whimpering in the closet. When I opened it, I saw my dog staring at the wall, his eyes wide and fearful. But there was nothing there, or so I thought. She went to tuck her child into bed, only to find an exact replica of him sleeping under the covers beside him. They say that everyone has a doppelganger, but I never expected to meet mine in an abandoned asylum. I thought the scratching on the inside of my closet was just a rat until I saw the red, glowing eyes staring back at me. I woke up to find a note on my bedside table that read, "I've been watching you sleep. You look so peaceful." My friends and I were hiking in the woods when we stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. As we walked through the door, we heard a voice whisper, "Get out." I always thought the shadows in my room were just tricks of the light until one night they started moving on their own. I was home alone when I heard the piano in the living room start playing by itself. But when I went to investigate, the room was empty. I heard a baby crying on the baby monitor. As I went to pick her up from her crib, I realized that my wife and I buried her a week ago. The old man next door was always friendly, but I never understood why he was so obsessed with his garden. That was until I saw what was buried underneath the flowers. The new house I moved into had a secret room that wasn't on the floor plan. Inside, I found a dusty old mirror that showed me a reflection of myself, but with no reflection of the room behind me. I thought I was alone in the elevator until I heard someone whisper my name. As I scrolled through my phone, I saw a picture of myself sleeping that I didn't remember taking. My daughter's imaginary friend was always by her side. It wasn't until I saw a photo of my deceased sister that I realized who her friend really was. Every night, I hear someone tapping on my window, but when I look outside, there's no one there. I was walking in the woods when I heard a child's laughter. But when I turned around, all I saw was a swing moving back and forth with no one on it. I couldn't move as I watched my reflection smile back at me, even though I wasn't smiling. The fortune teller told me that I would die alone. As I left her booth, I realized that I was the only person in the carnival.